Human trafficking. Trafficking is a persons in a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights. Every year, thousands of men, women, and children fall into the hands of traffickers in their own country and even abroad. Almost every country in the world is affected by trafficking, whether as a country of origin, transit, or destination for victims. UNODC, as guardian of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. So, there are the three elements of human trafficking. These are act, means, purpose. Act, what is done? The trafficker recruits, transport, transfer, harbors, or receive a person. Means they do this through threats, coercion, fraud, deception, abuse of power, preying on vulnerability, abduction. Purpose, with intent of exploiting the person through prostitution of others, sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, servitude, or removal of organs.
The definition contained in Article 3 of the Trafficking in Person Protocol is meant to provide consistency and consensus around the world on the phenomenon of trafficking in persons. Article 5 therefore requires that the conduct set out in Article 3 be criminalized in domestic legislation. Domestic legislation does not need to follow the language of the Trafficking in Person Protocol precisely, but should be adopted in accordance with domestic legal system to give effect to the concepts contained in the protocol. In addition to the criminalization of trafficking, the Trafficking in Person Protocol requires criminalization also of the following. First is attempt to commit a trafficking offense. Second is participation such an accomplice in such an offense. Last is organizing and directing others to commit trafficking. National legislation should adopt the broad definition of trafficking prescribed in the protocol. The legislative definition should be dynamic and flexible, so as to empower the legislative framework to respond effectively to trafficking, which is the following. Occurs both across borders and within a country, not just cross-border. Second is for a range of exploitative purposes, not just sexual exploitation. Third is victimize children, women, and men, not just women or adults, but and children. Take place with or without the involvement of organized crime groups.
Human trafficking is not the same as human smuggling. Human smuggling is consensual, whereas trafficking is done against a person's will. Rothman 2017. There are common types of human trafficking: labor and domestic servitude. Sex trade is a crime when women, men, and or children are forcefully involved in a commercial sex act. In the United States, any minor under the age of 18 engaged in commercial sex act is automatically considered a victim of sex trafficking under the law. law worldwide. It's estimated that there are 4.5 million victims of sex trafficking. Forced labor can be understood as work that is performed involuntarily and under the menace of any penalty. It refers to situations in which persons are coerced to work through the use of violence or intimidation, or by more subtle means such as manipulated debt, retention of identity papers, or threats of denunciation to immigration authorities. Domestic servitude is the seemingly normal practice of life in help that is used as cover for the exploitation and control of someone, usually from another country. It is a form of forced labor, but it also warrants its own category of slavery because of the unique context and challenge it presents. So, the example of domestic servitude is a form of trafficking in human being which is extremely difficult to detect because of the work performance in private residence, a seemingly normal practice that is used as cover for the exploitation and control of someone, for example, nannies or other domestic help.
Human trafficking happens in almost every country around the world, including the United States. Traffickers represent every social, ethnic, and racial group. Various organization types exist in trafficking, including large nationwide gangs and criminal organizations. So traffickers are not only men, women are also preparators. So increasingly, traffickers are using fear tactics to lure children and youth into commercial sex act and or compelled labor. So the issue is the traffickers' goals of exploiting and enslaving victims and the conceived and deceptive practices they used to do so. So traffickers may exploit youth for the purpose of commercial sex or forced labor. Enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, and or maintaining a minor for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation. So the next one is exploiting a minor through prostitution, exploiting a minor through survival sex, exploiting a minor through sex tourism, exploiting a minor by having her or he perform in sexual venues, exploiting a minor through forced labor including involuntary domestic servitude, exploiting a minor through bonded labor or debt bondage. So the last one is exploiting a minor through forced child labor. So, young people, especially those with risk factors, are vulnerable to human trafficking. The Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services issued new guidance on child trafficking to child welfare system. Health and Human Services issued new guidance on child trafficking to child welfare system and runaway and homeless youth programs because of increased vulnerability to trafficking for youth who have experienced prior abuse or who have run away from home. So these young people are often preyed on by traffickers and lured with false promises of love, money, and simply a better life. So traffickers may also use a variety of techniques to instill fear in victims and ensure that they remain under their control. So the first is physically restricting their freedom of movement, using the bandage, isolating victims from the public, isolating victims from their family members and members of the ethnic and religious community, creating victims of password, visas, and identification documents, using or threatening to use violence toward victims and their families, threatening to shame victims by exposing their circumstances to their family, telling victims
that they will be imprisoned for crimes they were forced to commit or deported by immigration violation if they contact authorities. So the last one is controlling victims' money. So, and that's all.